Alexander had conquered the last bastion of resistance in the mountains, and triumphant, he rejoined the main force of the Macedonian army, which was led by Hephaestion in the spring of 326 BCE. The imposing pontoon bridge over the great Indus River was complete, a marvel of military engineering that allowed the Macedonian army, in all its glory, to formally enter the Punjab. In the capital of his ally Ambi, king of Taxila, Alexander was received with all the pomp and reverence due to a conqueror. But the respite was brief. The real challenge was on the other side of the next great river, the Hydaspes. On the opposite bank of the river, King Porus from the powerful kingdom of the Pauravas had received Alexander's demand for submission with a lion's disdain. He would not bow. Porus was a man of legendary stature and unwavering courage, trusting in his army, his people, and above all, in his most terrifying weapons, a force of 200 war elephants, colossal beasts that promised to crush the Macedonian phalanx and turn Alexander's legendary cavalry into a mass of panic and terror. The march from Taxila to the Hydaspes was marked by growing tension. Upon reaching the riverbank, Alexander faced a formidable obstacle. The river was swollen by torrential monsoon rains, a nearly insurmountable natural barrier. On the opposite bank, like a living wall, Porus's army stood ready, his elephants visible as mobile war towers, a sight that chilled even the most experienced Macedonian veterans. A frontal attack would be suicide, and Alexander knew it. Thus began a game of wits, a duel between two of the greatest commanders of their age. For weeks, Alexander waged a campaign of deception and psychological warfare. He split his forces, marching noisily along the riverbank, pretending to prepare for crossings at multiple points. He spread the rumor that he would wait for the end of the monsoon. Each night, the torches and sounds of the Macedonian camp shifted location, forcing Porus to move his sentries and elephants in a grueling vigil, wearing down the morale and readiness of his troops. Porus, ever watchful, mirrored every move, but constant uncertainty began to erode his confidence. At last, Alexander found the opportunity he had been waiting for. 17 miles upstream, there was a sharp bend in the river, an island covered with forest, and terrain that could conceal his movements. He left his general Craterus at the main camp with a significant portion of the army, with clear orders: keep the campfires burning, make noise, and only begin crossing if Porus moved the bulk of his forces, especially the elephants. On the chosen night, the skies seemed to favor Alexander. A violent storm broke over the region, the sound of thunder and lashing rain muffling any noise from the operation. Under the cover of darkness and the chaos of nature, Alexander led the elite of his army, the companion cavalry, the elite infantry of the Hydaspes, the archers, and the agile agrarians, on a forced march to the secret crossing point. The crossing of the turbulent river on rafts and improvised boats was an act of desperate courage. Many were swept away by the current, but most of the attacking force, numbering about 11,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry, reached the opposite bank by dawn. Porus, upon learning that a Macedonian force had crossed the river, made his first tactical mistake. Believing it to be a small detachment, he sent his son with a force of 2,000 horsemen and 120 chariots to annihilate them. The ensuing clash was swift and tragic. The terrain, soaked by the storm, had become a quagmire, neutralizing the Indian chariots. Alexander's cavalry, superior in numbers and tactics, surrounded and crushed the Indian force. Porus's son fought bravely, but fell to Macedonian spears. News of his son's death and the true scale of Alexander's crossing force struck Porus like lightning. Realizing the trap, he was forced to make a terrible decision: leave part of his troops to watch Craterus and march with the bulk of his army, including all the elephants, to face Alexander on ground he had not chosen. Porus organized his army with an imposing defensive logic. In the center, like a fortress of flesh and bone, he positioned his 200 war elephants, with his infantry interspersed among them. On the wings, his cavalry and the remaining chariots. It was a formation designed to absorb a frontal attack and annihilate the enemy with the shock power of the beasts. Seeing the formation, Alexander knew a direct assault on the center would be a massacre. His genius for adaptation manifested once again. He realized Porus's cavalry was weaker than his own. His plan was audacious in its simplicity. Crush the flanks first, create chaos, and only then deal with the center. He concentrated most of his cavalry, led by himself, on his right wing. He ordered the cavalry on his left, under Conus's command, to carry out a diversion, while he executed the decisive blow. At the sound of the trumpets, Alexander led the companion cavalry in a furious charge, not against the center, but against the left wing of Porus's cavalry. The impact was devastating. The Indian cavalry, outmatched in skill and discipline, broke under pressure and, in panic, retreated behind their own elephants, causing initial disorder. Seeing his left flank collapsing, Porus ordered his elephants to advance. The ground trembled as the colossal beasts moved forward, their trumpeting a nightmarish sound for the Macedonians. The first impact on the phalanx was terrifying. The Sarissa spears splintered against their thick hides, and men were trampled or seized by trunks and hurled into the air. For a moment, the Macedonian line wavered. But Alexander had prepared for this. He unleashed his agile and deadly agrarians, light infantry, whose mission was not to confront the beasts head-on, but to hunt their masters. With a hail of darts and javelins, they targeted the elephants' eyes, and, crucially, the men guiding them. At the same time, the phalanx executed a maneuver of superhuman discipline. Instead of holding as a solid wall, they opened corridors in their formation. The advancing elephants, many already wounded and without their drivers, were funneled through these gaps, becoming easy targets for the soldiers on the flanks, who attacked their legs and bellies. Chaos ensued. The elephants, maddened by fear and pain, could no longer distinguish friend from foe. Many turned back, and in their desperate flight, trampled their own lines of Indian infantry stationed behind them. Porus's most powerful weapon had not only been defeated, but was now turned against his own men. With Porus's lines in complete disarray, Alexander's cavalry, now in control of the flanks, completed the encirclement, attacking the Indian army from behind. At this point, Craterus's forces, seeing the battle won, finally crossed the river and joined the pursuit, sealing the fate of Porus's army. The battle turned into a slaughter. Porus, however, fought to the very end. Mounted on his command elephant, he was a tower of defiance amid the collapse, hurling spears at approaching enemies, even though he was gravely wounded. Only when he saw all was lost did he finally try to withdraw. Captured and brought before Alexander, what followed would become legendary. The conqueror, impressed by the stature and dignity of his adversary, asked how he wished to be treated. Porus's response, regal and defiant, echoed across the silent battlefield. "As a king." That answer not only saved his life, it earned Alexander's respect in a way no submission could have. In a political masterstroke that astonished his own generals, Alexander not only spared Porus, but reinstated him on his throne, returning his kingdom and even adding neighboring territories to his domain. He turned a powerful enemy into an even more powerful ally, a vassal ruler whose loyalty would be guaranteed by both honor and debt. The victory at the Hydaspes was, perhaps, Alexander's most brilliant tactical masterpiece. But its cost was terrible. Macedonian casualties were among the highest of the entire campaign. The men who survived were exhausted and psychologically shaken. They had looked into the eyes of a new kind of war, and though victorious, the experience had changed them forever. In memory of the victory and his beloved horse Bucephalus, who had succumbed to his wounds after the battle, Alexander founded 2 new cities on the riverbanks, Nicaea, Victory, and Bucephala. Yet while the foundations for new cities were being laid, the foundations of his own army began to crack. The victory at the Hydaspes was the highest point of Alexander's conquest. But from the dizzying heights of that triumph, he would be forced to look into the abyss, at the exhaustion of his men and the end of his dream of conquering the known world. The journey east was over. The long and bitter journey home was about to begin.